make others know that as unions, we need to remain united. That's thus the reason for the song. When the unions inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there shall be no power greater and where beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? For the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity for the union makes. Come on, let's go now. And they have taken until me that they never toiled to earn, but without a brain and muscle, not a single wheel can turn. We can break their hearts if we gain our freedom when we learn that the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Oh yes, solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union make. In our hands is a power than the hoarded gold, greater than the might of arm, magnified 1,000-fold. We can bring to birth anew from the ashes of the earth, for the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Come on, hold hands. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. For the union makes us strong. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Baino. Next on the agenda for this morning is a talk by President of the GTC. Okay. All right. There's a slight adjustment to this morning program. We'll call on the President of the Ghana Trade Union Congress to have a discussion with us. Sister, call it McDonald. Sister McDonald.
Thank you, Brother Chair. Good morning, everyone. We don't sound like trade unionists who are ready for this fight. Good morning, everyone. I mean, it's only about minutes to 11, and so we're supposed to be bubbling with a lot of energy. And after such lusty singing, according to Brother Baino, we ready to take on Venezuela even. And so today, as we continue to advance the workers' struggle for social and economic justice, I want to remind us that we can't do this alone. I said that on Wednesday evening, and I'm repeating it again. We cannot do this alone. We as labor must put our hands and our hearts together and our energies and everything that we have within us, because the union makes us strong. I want to say to us this morning that every day, every single day, our workers face challenges. Even in our unions, we face challenges. Am I talking the truth? Even in our unions, we face challenges. Our women are discriminated against. Our men are being discriminated against. We got some pulling this side and some pulling that side, and some because behave or believe that because I'm on one political stage, I can't support injustices that is being done because it is my, you know the story? I figure you didn't get me just now. Let me repeat that. The workers are struggling, and as workers' representatives, we are pulling on the left, and some of us are pulling on the right, because some of us feel that the political stage that I'm on is not, I shouldn't be speaking out against it. So rather than supporting the cause of the workers, we decided we're going to stand on the cause of the politicians. Am I speaking the truth? Good. So once we're on that page, we understand that we've got to change that whole mindset. As a trade unionist, we ought to stand on the pillars and the values that have upheld the trade union movement for all these years. If Hubert Nathaniel Critchlow or Joseph Polydor or some other trade unionist would have taken the stand of the politicians, we would not have been here today to enjoy the benefits we are now enjoying. And so because of the fight that they had there, and because of the struggles they were able to overcome, we can stand here as women in the trade union movement and have our say. Are you hearing me, ladies? We can stand and have our say. Because of their struggles, our menfolk can stand here and proclaim the proclamation that they would have made many, many years ago, while we as women stand beside them. I want to remind you, colleagues, that today, tomorrow, next week, the struggles will not end. But it is in our own interest to every time and all the time create and come up with new strategies to embrace the battles that are before us. I guess you've recognized by now there was a massive announcement yesterday for the teachers. And while we don't have a whole lot of the teachers in the house this morning, 1, 2, or 3, they feel the pain of the majority of teachers. And so while we heard the government and the president, as a matter of fact, commenting and making, you know, this big, insensitive, and unimpressive statement about this salary adjustment, one would want to ask the question, why is the government afraid of collective bargaining? What is scaring them? Why, after all the talks about the return of collective bargaining, when you're sitting in the seat now, you don't remember those kinds of talks? One would want to ask the question, why is this government bent on dividing and ruling? And so while those questions are pondering in our minds, we as a trade union movement ought to come up with the strategies to counter or to conquer all of those divide and rule strategies that are being employed by the government. I want to remind us that as leaders and as trade unionists, we have got to be able to stand tall and to represent our members without fear or favor. We must stand tall and represent our members without being uncomfortable about making persons feeling offended. We have got to preach the message that has been preached a long time ago. We've got to continue to preach that message. And while we preach that message, I can assure you, many, many will be listening to us. Many are going to feel hurt. And those are the ones who are anti-workers. Eh? Many will feel upset. Many are going to be offended, but we cannot allow the offense and the offended and the feel bad of a few cause us to retract and allow the masses to suffer. With regards to the teachers' issue, the masses have not yet enjoyed any part of that announcement that was made yesterday. Because if you listen to the president, he said it's just about 4,500 who will benefit from that. And in the teaching profession, we have 13,000 teachers. So you can understand what I'm saying. Here again, we see another act or another play out on the stage of the One Guyana ideology. You get what I'm saying? The One Guyana ideology. But we can allow any politician to create in our minds any one Guyana. We have one people, one nation, one destiny. And together we combined together are Guyanese. And so whenever one set of Guyanese workers are affected, then it should affect all of us. All of us. So when the vendors are affected, we should be affected. When the public servants are affected, we should be affected. When in specific the nurses are affected, we must be affected. When the teachers are affected, we must be affected. And so together, the GTU, the GPSU, the University Union, the Vendors Union, and all the unions, we must feel or we must be affected when one of our brother or a sister is affected. I say to you, the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever.
Thank you, Sister President. Brothers and sisters, I just would like to add to the sister appeal. In this industrial struggle, I think the time has come that we must look for new ways, new strategies to fight an old battle. We cannot be doing the same thing over and over and expect the same or different result. So that's my little addition to this, Mr. President. Implored on us. This morning we have with us no stranger to us, retired Rear Admiral, head of the Army, now Dr. Gary Bess, and will give us a talk on the Guyana Venezuela or the controversy. Put your hand together for
Thank you very much. Comrades, I think that's might be the best way to address all of us, to be all comrades. And I've been asked to look at the resolution on the Guyana, TUC's resolution on the Guyana-Venezuela border controversy. And I want to talk around the issue a little bit. Then I'll go through the resolution with you and see if you're happy. And then I will hand the proceedings to my elder and the Secretary of the TUC, Venerable Lincoln Lewis. So we're comrades, but we need to move to another stage, a stage that some of us are comfortable with and accustomed to back in the 70s and 80s. And that's comrades in arms. So you can repeat after me. We are comrades in. We are comrades in. Comrades in. Right. So we have to bear arms for this country. A few points on the controversy. And I think the reason why it is called a controversy is because for the Geneva Agreement and that discussion, they needed to refer to it as something. That's why it's called a controversy. However, the facts are clear. In 1899, there was a full and final settlement of the border between Guyana, British Guyana at the time, and Venezuela. That is the fact. And that's what we have to remember. We know Essequibo is ours, because we live in Essequibo. Once you live in Guyana, you live in Essequibo. Once you live in Guyana, you live in Demerara. Once you live in Guyana, you live in Bordeaux. And once you live in Guyana, you also live in Region 11. But we know Essequibo is ours, right? As my colleague said, Essequibo belongs to us. But the most important thing, I believe, for us to focus on now is that the claim by Venezuela is a spurious claim. That claim to Essequibo. That claim is a spurious claim. So we had full, final, and perfect settlement of the issue in 1899. Using the borders we have right now. If you check the 1966 Constitution, you will find the same description. If you check 1970 Guyana Constitution, you will find the borders in the Constitution. And when you check the 1980 Constitution, the famous Burnham's Constitution, you will find Article 2, a description and reference for borders. So what colony called Britain to now those borders, but more importantly, in the Burnham Constitution, as it was infamously called then and now famously called today, because we're now dealing with the issue in the Constitution, and the Attorney General referred to it when he spoke in Parliament. Somehow the Burnham Constitution is the thing now for defense. It is located under Article 2 of the Constitution, the 1980 Constitution, Article 2. To change Article 2, we have to go to a referendum in Guyana. That means the only way we can change our borders is if we go to referendum and get to change those borders. Nothing else can change. President, no prime minister, no secretary, no minister, no individual person can change the borders of this dear land of Guyana. Only the people, and we have to go to a referendum and agree to change it. But that's not going to happen because Essequibo is ours. So we will not be going to change those borders. So we are ahead of Venezuela. Venezuela's argument is everything that happened before 1890 war. That's the main argument. They have no evidence, has conducted themselves peacefully and professionally, even at the Geneva Agreement that has nothing to do technically with the boundary, because the boundary was already set in 1899. But I know you're aware of politics and geopolitics, and things happen for political reasons. As you're aware, So I'll go to the resolution that is proposed for this Congress. And so here's the resolution. Resolution of the Guyana-Venezuela border controversy. And this is your document, TUC. The TUC Delegates Conference, having assessed and studied the historical and recent developments with regard to the border controversy between Guyana and Venezuela, wishes to pass first paragraph, recognizing the need for peace, security, and national development in Guyana and the rest of Latin America and the Caribbean region, and that unresolved border issues can be an obstacle to peace, security, and national development. I say that's a perfect clause. Reaffirming the principles of the United Nations Charter, including and especially the principle of the peaceful resolution of disputes. That's a perfect clause. And this is one I've introduced. I want to add this. Reaffirming that Guyana's borders are sacrosanct, described, and embedded and protected under Article 2 of the nation's Constitution. I'm recommending we put that in. Do you approve? Recommend we add this also at the beginning. Recognizing that the only matter to be resolved between Guyana and Venezuela at the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, is the validity of the 1899 arbitral award. And that's the only matter to be concerned with. Do you approve that? Good. And this is going back to the resolution. Recognizing that the claim by Venezuela to the Essequibo region constitute an existential threat, that is a permanent threat, to the existence of Guyana as a state and undermines the peace and security of the region. That's perfect. This one is a little long, but it's the thrust of what you're putting forward. Commending, and I put in here successive Guyana governments for taking the decision to seek a peaceful resolution to Venezuela's spurious claim to 5/8 of its territory by seeking to resolve that spurious claim by peaceful means, such as instruments of the good officer process, which is passed, and the enhanced good officer process, which is passed, and finally by persuading the Secretary General of the United Nations to revert the controversy to the International Court of Justice, where it is right now, for an adjudication that the 1899 award, and I put this language in, was and is still valid, and that it constituted and constitutes a full, perfect, and final settlement of the controversy between Guyana and Venezuela. And that is your main clause. Do you approve that? What we're saying here is that it was and is. It was final and is final. We want to have language that shows the past and present, that it constituted and constitutes the borders. So we want to put a strong language in it. That's right. I continue. Taking note of the fact that the ICJ has determined that it has jurisdiction to hear this matter, and that it has ruled against the two objections brought by the government of Venezuela. And it only remains for a final ruling to be made on this matter. So we're saying it twice using different language. Deploring the recent saber rattling by the government of Venezuela by bringing troops to the border with Guyana, ostensibly to deal with mining problems, and a resolution by the National Assembly to vote for a referendum which is contrary, I want to include this, Elder Lincoln, which is contrary to international law and the Geneva Agreement on the border controversy. So we need to say that what Venezuela is doing is illegal under international law and not something permitted under the Geneva Agreement. Taking note of the, and I include this, uncontrolled and illegal influx of Venezuelans into Guyana, and this is an inclusion too, at a time when the president of Venezuela is threatening to annex 5/8 of its territory, and the socio-political and security impact this could have on the development of specific Guyana border and other regions, and the possibility that elements of these refugees can have a malevolent or bad effect on the peace and stability in Guyana. So we're saying that at the time when the president of Venezuela is threatening to annex Guyana, we have to be extra careful about the people who are coming into Guyana from Venezuela. And we are recognizing that in that mixture, they are likely to have people who are agents provocateurs, forward elements, here to set up and establish a farm base so that he, if he intends to be mad enough to cross the border, that he has troops in there. How more difficult, how more anti-patriotic it can be that as the government of Guyana is not concerned, or certainly not speaking in concerned language, that this is not a time to have uncontrolled influx of Venezuelan migrants into Guyana. When we've been threatened by the same gentleman to whom we extending a hand, his people, a kind of humanitarian hand. So this clause is meant to deal with that. And this one is the last one before we go to the resolve clauses. Reaffirming, and I've included this one for your consideration, reaffirming that under international law, the state of Guyana has a duty, and by extension government, to ensure that the influx of migrants do not threaten the peace, stability, and economic livelihood of the existing population. And what we say in here, there's no international law that says you have to receive migrants beyond what your population can absorb, beyond what your social services can absorb, beyond what your health services can absorb. Our health facilities have been prepared for a population of 800,000. It is almost stupid to think that we can have 1.2 million persons there with the same health facilities. So at this time, it is necessary for that influx to be controlled and to be ordered. And if I may depart briefly, I wrote an article on this issue, and I recommended to the government that we do three things. First, that the government and the opposition agree to an amnesty for approximately 18 months. During that amnesty, all Venezuelans that came into Guyana from that period to now will report to various centers across Guyana in the presence of the government and opposition, the International Office of Migration, and United Nations High Commission for Refugees. And there in those centers, if you have legitimate documents linking you to Guyanese, then you get Guyanese papers. Then we look at those persons who fled Venezuela for persecution, fear of persecution. They become refugees. And then we look at another set and say, okay, you can remain as economic migrants. However, my comrades, all that I've said just now is conditioned under an agreement by the government and opposition, which means the people of Guyana, as to the exact amount of people we can have in this country right now. So if perchance, when the calculations are done by the economists, etc., we can only absorb 10,000 persons, then it's only 10,000. But the first of those will be those with Guyanese roots. The second will be those who are refugees because they run fear persecution. And the last, those who would remain as economic migrants. But we will have data controlling and knowing what is happening in our country. That was an article I wrote. I haven't heard anything back since then, but I know the government has heard it. Now we come to the reserved clauses. Be it resolved that the TUC Delegates Conference, 1, reaffirms that Guyana's borders are sacrosanct, described, embedded, and protected under Article 2 of the nation's constitution. The TU Delegates Conference condemns the persistent threat to Guyana's territorial integrity and sovereignty by successive governments of Venezuela. The TUC Delegates Conference urges the government of Guyana to constitute, and we're going to add this, and keep in operation the relevant parliamentary committee or committees to monitor and assess the developments on the border controversy with a view to making recommendations to the government of Guyana. We're saying that we need to have a permanent body dealing with border development. If you look at this case carefully, Venezuela has been prosecuting this case since it became independent. I think that was 1823. They've never stopped. We must recognize and understand that we have to keep defending Guyana, and more particularly Southern Essequibo, all the time. The same way our borders can't change unless there's a referendum, it's the same thing in Venezuela. There's a strong possibility that they may not accept the ICJ ruling, so we still have to defend this nation. We need permanent policy-making bodies in Parliament to ensure that we have the right assets. The TUC Delegates Congress urges the government of Guyana to revive or initiate a long-term public relations program by which Guyanese in all our regions can be aware and study the implications of the border controversy for the long-term development of Guyana. And the reason why this is important is we don't know of the effect of what is happening. What is happening in Region 1? What is the impact of the fear and the threat of annexation to our citizens in Region 1? We need to know that. What is the fair impact of those policies in Region 10, Region 7, Region 6? Are we going to have a population migration to Region 4 from Region 1 and 2? What will happen to Region 4? So this clause is to ensure that the government is put on notice that it has to deal with these issues. The TUC Delegates Conference recommends that the government of Guyana places the border controversy on the national curriculum of the nation, so that the border controversy is understood by Guyanese from the high school or from high school to university, or we can add from nursery to university. The TUC Delegates Conference urges the government of Guyana to re-establish a border policy which can facilitate the flow of information from those regions adjoining the Venezuelan state, that's regions 1, 8, and others, and which can be used to formulate plans and programs for the defense of the nation's territorial integrity and sovereignty. In all the discussions we're hearing, we're not hearing clear words from the government on defense. On defense assets. Our first line of defense in Guyana is defense diplomacy. And we decided since 1966, at the beginning of our independence, when Venezuela, by taking over the entire Ankoko Island, which belongs to both nations, border rivers, the Cuyuni River and the Wenemu Rivers, those are the two border rivers. The Ankoko Island is in the river. Half of it belongs to Guyana and half belongs to Venezuela. At independence, Venezuela sent us a gift. They sent their troops to take over the entire Ankoko Island. So my comrades, since 1966, Venezuela has been occupying Guyana's territory. Since 1966, Venezuela and only Venezuela has been the aggressor in this incident. That's the only aggressor, and that's why we believe we have a strong case. But you will recall, some of you and those who don't recall would have heard, that we created a strong defense response to Venezuela. Started with defense diplomacy, where we had missions going all over the world speaking about this issue. We had friends in CARICOM, personal friends to the then leader. We had friends in Yugoslavia, friends in Russia, friends in Cuba, friends in many parts of the world who, when they spoke, Venezuela felt as if they were going to come to our defense. So there, Venezuela was on the defense. Today, we're not getting that sense. We're not getting that sense from CARICOM nations, even CARICOM heads of government. No one is coming out individually to say, I am there for Guyana. So Guyana has to put Guyana's interests first. So we need to ensure that information flows so we can have defense assets. So defense diplomacy, active defense diplomacy and other defense assets, meaning hardware, actually having hardware that you could put on the borders to defend the border. If I may go a little bit into how we would conduct this defense. The idea is that the Guyana Defense Force, because of the size and because of the nation's wealth, could never have a population to match Venezuela. So between the three countries, we agreed, this is defense strategy, that we should have at least parity or superiority with one of the three border countries. And that's the eastern neighbor. But the two other neighbors, because they're so large in terms of military might, we will have active defense diplomacy. And if it comes to the point where we have to engage, we must be able to engage those forces. They engage those forces, that is, fight with them to a point where there's international help that comes in. So that narrow window when we will fight that enemy, whether it's either of the two, or right now it looks like Venezuela, if God forbid it happens, we must be able to deal with them until we have international help. And it's not that Ghana wants to go on a war footing and spend all its money in defense assets, but you can't have next to nothing. You can't have antiquated equipment. You have to modernize your forces, upgrade your forces, and we have to keep doing that, and we have to spend the people's money on that. So that is what this clause says. It's a very important one. That's why I spent so much time on it. The TUC delegates urges the government of Guyana, and this is the final clause, to remain vigilant about the influx of Venezuelan refugees, which could have a good or bad influence on matters affecting the security and territorial integrity and sovereignty of Guyana. And your resolution concludes as follows. The TUC delegates emphasizes the necessity for a peaceful resolution of the border controversy between Guyana and Venezuela in accordance with the principles of international law. And full stop. We went on to say before, as determined by the final decision of the ICJ. I believe we should move that from it. The reason why we should remove that last sentence, we don't want to put ourselves in a position where the last sentence makes us all feel extremely confused that the ICJ is there and we forget that our borders are in our constitution. So we don't need the last sentence. All we need is emphasizes the necessity for a peaceful resolution of the border controversy between Guyana and Venezuela in accordance with the principles of international law. And that is the end of your resolution. I hope I've explained it, but if there are any questions, and with permission of the chair, feel free to ask any questions or make any contribution. Chair. Oh, I see this distinguished gentleman here.
I'm sorry to be taking away the microphone. But I note in his initial amendment, it spoke of the Constitution of Guyana. I wish that you spell out your statements before that, speaking of the Constitution before the 1966, so that that will be the clarity clause for the other parts of this motion that we are moving in terms of what we say about the Guyana Constitution. So that anything that speaks of the Constitution after that in the motion would have already given you the clarity that not only, thank you, not only the 1960, not only the Burnham Constitution spoke about it, but the previous constitutions. So let us show it chronologically also in the initial amendment. Thank you.
Excellent point, and we can include that, and we conclude it in this manner. We can say reaffirming that successive Guyanese constitutions, beginning in 1964, continue in 1966, embedded the borders within its articles, something to that effect. So we'll include it. Good, excellent contribution. That's right. That's a big document. People are afraid of the Guyana Constitution. If you follow it, we will all be equal in this country. If you follow the Constitution, we'll all have a very good life. All of us, if we follow the Guyana Constitution. That's why some folks don't like the Guyana Constitution. Any other comments or questions?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I want to be the devil's advocate here. You notice in 2019, there's a no confidence motion in Parliament, and we know the result from that. We see there's an influx of Venezuelans in Guyana, and there's a fear that most of these Venezuelans would get citizenship so they can vote. There's that fear. We have elections coming up in 2025. We have these voters, these people allowed to vote. Just supposing they're allowed to vote. And the PPP get over 66% of the majority. There's a clause that in the Constitution that you can change the Constitution by 2/3 of the majority.
Well, I think it's a very good observation and question. And the fact that it reflects and represents some of the concerns of a number of Guyanese, I'll attempt to address it. To change the borders, we need a national referendum, not 2/3 majority. That's the first issue. So, meaning parliamentarians cannot do that. Because when you go 2/3 majority in your constitution, you're dealing with the parliamentarians sitting in the parliament. So if perchance there's a 2/3 majority in the next elections on either side, because I want to believe, I'm wearing a different cap now, that on either side it is possible to have a 2/3 majority. Then neither of the sides, whether it's the PPP or the coalition, can change those borders. You have to go to a referendum, meaning you have to have another election where the people will go and cast a ballot in favor of or in disfavor of this particular question on the ballot, which would be whether we should change our borders. So that's my first response to the hypothetical situation. In that hypothetical situation, you did mention a number of things which are of concern to Guyanese, and that's the possibility of number of persons, maybe thousands, getting Guyanese citizenship, who, I imply from what you said, do not deserve Guyanese citizenship. It will be very important and an obvious requirement of the government to ensure that only persons who meet the requirements under the Constitution for citizenship to be given citizenship, because we will be creating some significant problems in Guyana. Because unless you're living in space, people will know who you are and where you're living, and they will know that you are not a Guyanese citizen because you showed up a few days ago and your mother and father are not known. We don't know your aunts and uncles. You don't have any children. You're 23 years of age, and people will come to the conclusion that you're not a citizen. And when they see your name on the voters list, that is when the confusion will start. There will be massive objections to these names on the list, and then we have an electoral convoluted system, right? Sprung from that, we have all these challenges, and then we become a nation that looks as though we don't know what they're doing. So I would say that the government and the opposition, as political parties, you know, you go to the poll on your merit, on your conduct, and you should not try or create the impression that you're attempting to have votes or voters through any means that could be very dangerous, not to mention illegal. So we have to be on the watch out. And the Trade Unions Congress is so important in this regard because irrespective of which political parties you are, generally workers, you fall under the TUC. Because let me say this also, there's an economic aspect to this. At the moment, local businesses are under severe pressure from Chinese businesses. And that's because China is the largest producer of goods in the world. If you look at your iPhone or your Android phone, it's made in China for an American company or a Swiss company or a Jewish. It is made for another company. China produces the most goods in the world. And therefore, Chinese businessmen can have goods on credit from Chinese manufacturers at a cheaper price and undercut your businesses here. So that is the challenge. And that's part of the International Free Trade Association. That's part of this new neoliberal free trade arrangement that was introduced into the world. If you add to that Venezuela, which is an industrialized country also, going through current problems, When that economy is restored, you will have a number of forward elements, Venezuelans, who can receive goods also from Venezuela. Most of the plastics in the region is produced in Venezuela. So again, they'll come and undercut your businesses, our businesses. So the business community must understand this possible implication. At the moment, contractors are happy because they're exploiting the labor of the Venezuelans at the moment. But he or she, in years to come, will have a family who may very well be working for Venezuelan contractors and put our contractors out of business. There's an economic element, and as I mentioned before, there's nothing in international law that says migrants must put the nation state at risk to which they're going. We have to protect our people, we have to protect our resources and our assets. Right? So that's my answer to your, a little long, but it's my answer to your hypothetical question. Any other contribution? Can I refer to you by your real name? What to see on the floor?
There's an observation, sir. My colleague, we discussed it, and what we thought is that government should embark on paying persons to go and live in these communities, like Etrembang, Aberuma, Port Kaituma. There are Amerindian settlements at other areas along there. Okay, and if they can probably send persons, pay them small towns or areas, and if who doesn't have a work or a place to stay, you get them along those border places. Because you would remember that this was thought out a long time ago by Pops Burnham, where he even wanted to put Mabaruma as our capital. You know, so I think that we ought to see if we can get the government to embark on getting people out there, pay them to go and establish small communities.
Yes, thanks. I think it's something we can look at in the clauses. I think there's room to include it, or we can have a separate clause. Or we can put it in a manner, perhaps at first blush, I can say that the people of Guyana will call on the government, or the TUC, they'll call on the government too, and then we put it in, because we have to populate and create economic drivers in those communities and the border towns. So you're talking about border towns. I think I heard about a border patrol bill that's supposed to go to Parliament. A border patrol bill to go to Parliament from the Attorney General. Well, that speaks to the issue that there's no plan and no leadership. The Guyana Defense Force is the authorized legal agency for the borders. You don't need a border bill. The Guyana Defense Force is the agency for air, land, and sea. That's the work of the Guyana Defense Force, the duty of the Guyana Defense Force. And there is an act called the Defense Act that the Guyana Defense Force works under. And then in the Constitution, Article 197A, it speaks to the role, the duty of the Guyana Defense Force, which is defense. We don't need a border patrol unit when the Guyana Defense Force is required and has been and is on the border. The Coast Guard protects our maritime borders. When I served in the Coast Guard many years ago, I was responsible for arresting Venezuelan vessels illegally fishing in our exclusive economic zone. We took them to court and we won those cases. That is why Guyana case is so strong before the ICJ, because we reaffirmed over and over the territorial integrity. So when I hear about the border patrol, it sounds good and flashy. What it actually says is saying to the government that there's nothing out there. And that's an attack and an indictment on the Guyana Defense Force. We are there. So again, what we need to do is provide sufficient defense assets to the Guyana Defense Force so it can conduct border patrols, another border patrol unit, because that unit is already the Guyana Defense Force. But coming back to the point raised by the great Otusi and Colonel Saul, who's somewhere, I know where he is right now, and Leland, I think we'll get it in there that we need to have those border communities strengthened economically, socially. That the Congress calls on the government to return to the return. What would we say? To return. You agree, Saul? the TUC Congress calls in going to return to the previous defense plan of populating and providing economic benefits and increasing our border towns. I think that would bring it in. How that sounds? No, use
Mike. Okay. My thinking is that we have to create a concept of total defense. And in that, we must look at a robust living frontier policy where we incentivize persons to settle in certain communities. Right now on the western border, apart from Mabaruma, Matakai, and yes, Mabaruma and Matakai, in the Northwest region, are the major towns. The other communities are Amerindian settlements, and they're exclusive. And so my thinking, if we create these robust living frontier settlements, it will serve as a defense mechanism for us. Of course, you have to incentivize. There must be some incentive scheme so person will go there, and it will become easy for us to defend those communities. Oh, I actually forget, Iterimban. But the problem is at Iterimban, there are many Venezuelans there. And when one take into consideration the situation with Russia, Russia and Ukraine, Russia and Moldova, Russia and Georgia, we ought to be concerned because we have a lot of Venezuelans coming across the side. I empathize with those who are experienced in great difficulties over there and come here, but we must be cautious. Thank you.
Yes. Excellent contribution. We wanted to have a term, and Leland has given us a term. He said livable. What's the term again? Living frontier. So we can include that in because that's what it was, the concept of living frontier. Before I close, or I'm asked to remove myself from the podium, there is another important article in the Constitution that affects every single Guyanese, irrespective of ethnicity, age, and culture. And I think that is Article 33 of the Constitution. It says, it is the duty of every citizen to defend the state of Guyana. That is in the 1980 Constitution. It is the duty of every citizen to defend the state of Guyana. What sprung from that was this sentence, every citizen a soldier. And from that statement, we developed under the previous president, Burnham, total national defense. Leland mentioned it. Total national defense is what a country with a small military does. You take all the resources in the country and use that for your defense. So in terms of our military outlook, the concept was and practiced then a small army and a large reserve. That is the Israeli model. You have a small force and a large reserve, and the reserves are all over the country. Who are the reservists? People who have their normal jobs, but who sign up to be reserves and they do weekend training. Those are the reserves. You can be an economist, you could be a cleaner, you can be anything you want to be, and you can be a reserve, a doctor. So therefore, if in a time of conflict, you have people all over the country to support the military because they're part of that living frontier. They're part of those reserves. And the statement, every citizen a soldier, was misinterpreted politically in the past as if the PNC at the time was trying to militarize Guyana. Imagine if we had continued with every citizen a soldier. Imagine if we had continued all those reserve bases across Guyana and funded them right now. We won't be having the same discussion today. We'd feel a bit more comfortable that we have assets on those frontiers and they have become living frontiers, as my friend said we should have. So remember that. It is our duty. Tell your neighbor, tell your friends. It is our duty and we remain comrade in arms. At this point in time, I think I will take my leave or beg the elder to allow me to leave the stage. Thank you very much for your kind questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brother Best, Brother and Dr. Best. No. Um, my next task is to call on well, let me say this first. I was never aware that the controversy was about the validity of the award. I always thought we had a border controversy, but thank you for the new information. It's the validity of the award. You're never too old to learn. And let me say this for the young trade unionists. In the late 70s, I had a full militia training. So in those days, we march out parade at Camp Pahingano. So I'm an old man now, but I'm well prepared to defend our land. My next task is to call on Brother Namaskali Butusi. Could I call you Butusi? Brother Ian Andrews to read a resolution for us. Brother Andrews.
Good morning, comrades. I've been asked to have these clauses. I think there are 6 resolve clauses that you would have heard there. Dr. Gary Bess, Rear Admiral, former Chief of Staff of the Ghana Army, who gave a very passionate, equally informative presentation. I'd like to highlight something that would have been said by Commissaire, is that we would have been experiencing some things in this town and around the country where there seem to be a lot of young people doing nothing at all. In most cases, even me and even you are afraid to walk certain places. You know, we have to get the expense of having taxis because we could well be attacked by these youngsters. So, as we, to coin it this way, we can have the creation of a youth empowerment scheme. It creates incentives for young people to occupy the hinterland of Guyana with a view to the establishment of a viable and sustainable hinterland communities. We might have known it to be in people like they're afraid to mention national service and militia. There are many persons who came out of those organizations. They're doctors today. They're honorable persons. And I know it may be a difficult thing for us to get back there. Anyhow, I'd like to move that we accept these resolve clauses, the 6 resolve clauses, and its conclusion that as it was given by Dr. Bess. I hereby like to move that we accept this resolution, and I'd like to, if you'll permit me, Mr. Chairman, get a seconder from the floor. Your name? Anyhow, let me read the 6 clauses there. Okay. I hear you. I hear you. Okay, all right. I hear you. I hear you. You know, there's some of these guys, these older, well-groomed fellas, who from time to time will give us some advice that is very invaluable. So I'll read the clauses. 1, it resolved that 1, what I had done here is that when the doctor was reading, he would have highlighted areas that we ought to take out. So in clause 1, they're nothing taken out here, and I'll read them. The amendment would have come more or less in the conclusion, because there weren't many amendments here that he would have read his opening statements, but the clauses are here. And the conclusion would have had an amendment where he thought that we should not include as determined by the decision of this ICJ. Because we have it in our Constitution. So I'll read the clause now. 1, condemn the persistent threat to Guyana territorial integrity and sovereignty by successive governments of Venezuela. 2, urge the government of Guyana to constitute and keep in operation the relevant parliamentary committee to monitor and assess developments on the border controversy with a view to making recommendations to the government of Guyana. 3, urge the government of Guyana to revive or initiate a long-term public relations program by which Guyanese in all our region can be made aware and study the implications of the border controversy for the long-term development of Guyana. Recommends that government places the border controversy on the national curriculum of the nation so that the border controversy is understood by Guyanese from high school to university level. 5, urge the government of Guyana to reestablish a border policy which can facilitate the flow of information from those regions adjoining the Venezuelan state, and which can be used to formulate plans and programs for the defense of territorial integrity and sovereignty. 6, urges the government of Guyana to remain vigilant about the influx of Venezuelan refugees, which could have a benign or malevolent influence on matter affecting the security and territorial integrity and sovereignty of Guyana. Those are the resolve clause, and the conclusion emphasizes the necessity for a peaceful resolution of the border controversy between Guyana and Venezuela in accordance with the principles of international law. Those are the 6 resolve clause and conclusion. If there's anything, you've heard it, is there anything any person in the audience would like to speak on? Good. I'm proposing that what you may propose may be outside of my remit to answer, but I'll ask the doctor to answer if so be.
Anybody would like to make a contribution on the amendments to the motion? Contribution?
Thank you very much, Sessional Chairman. All protocols observed. I just have one little query. I heard, I think in the second aspect, you're talking about students from high school. Why wait until high school? He has changed it? Of course, because what I want to say is that I understand every little child in Venezuela From the time they were born, they were told that SUKB belongs to them. So therefore, we must adopt that same kind of attitude and let our students from nursery, from the womb, they must understand that SUKB belongs to us.
Thank you, my sister. The good doctor did said from nursery to university. So we can capture it from the exact wording from his presentation. So that brings us to a vote. Those in favor, say aye. Those against, the ayes have it. Our next presenter would be the General Secretary. I think he's supposed to have something to discuss with us. Brother General Secretary.
Comrades, I am working too hard. I'm not saying that I'm underpaid, because the trade union never underpay people. Thank you, Rear Admiral. Rear Admiral, thanks. Well, thanks on behalf of the Trade Union Congress. Let me say, let's welcome Brother Carl Greenwich, who's here. Carl, you did a wonderful job the other night. We are not going to allow things to go the same way they were going. We have to change. Change not only strategy, but we have to change personnel. I'm glad that we discussed the border issue today, and we do have a position. We are going to be meeting with the media today at 12 o'clock to do 2 responses, to see what we have done so far, and to respond to the operatives of the government who are insinuating, or they're saying to the society that they are not going to talk with trade unions that are politically aligned and not friendly to them. We want to know where they stand based on their oath of office. We will be addressing that today. After lunch, which will be not very far from now, after the press conference, which will take place at 12 o'clock, we will talk with the media at 12. We are going to be talking immediately after that about the NIS, its deficit, and the activation of the unemployment regime that had been established since in 1969. You see how long we're taking to get things done? But while we had money at that time to do it, we have money now that we can even give the same thing that we're giving to Guyanese. They're now giving to people who are illegal immigrants to buy votes. I want to say to you that I am not seeing the president. I'm not seeing the president. I know she has some other. That's her bag, right? I want to tell you something. Moved from near the bag. It's a women bag. Women bag always get money. She look for the best yard? I tell you, yes, that's good. Let me say to you that after that presentation, which will be done by Chris Ram, we will pass a resolution. And after that, we'll be talking about Article 13 and ordinary democracy. We have structured this conference for decisions. We're hoping that by 4 o'clock, all of us are going to be out of this place. But while we are going to be out of this place at 4 o'clock, we'll return at 7 o'clock to have some drinks and what have you. All of you who are here can bring who you want to. And if any one of you may be looking at who is here, remember all the men here are booked. Well, I thought all the men are honorable like me. Yeah, I am. So we are going to have that. But I believe that we are going very good. I believe that when we structure this program, is that we are of the view that there are issues that may be challenging, some issues that may be challenging, that may not have been captured. But let me say to you specifically what we want to see now is that when we conclude this conference and you depart from here, while you may be physically away from here, we would like to see that your spirit remains. I'm speaking about the spirit within the context of the struggle that we have to pursue. We will have to make sure that we organize in such a way that we engage every community from north to south and east to west to galvanize the society against the atrocities that are being committed. No longer we can allow, as a people, the confidence that has been reposed in us to be eroded, and more so, to cause those who were elected by us not to start working for us. This is not a difficult task. I'll tell you why it's not difficult. Let me take you back to about a month ago. There was a conference in New York, in the United States, organized by CJ. And before the conference started, the government was fully at work to engage the people, groups and persons, in fact, to give their side of a story that the conference had never spoken about. And after that conference, we have observed nearly every week, every day, they have been on every press conference of the government or the ruling party. They speak about the conference and they say that the conference was not successful. They say it was not successful. Well, if it was not successful and you talk about it every day, then something is wrong. Our situation here is that yesterday they started and they're making the point. The point was made by by the man in the government who knows where everybody sleeps, what everybody eat, what everybody earn, but he don't know that the man next door to him the man next door to him knew who he was picking up money for. He didn't know that. He has been saying, he has said yesterday, he said that we have a conference that we have invited a whole host of opposition people. I want to clear the air with you as delegates that at the opening on Wednesday, we invited the Prime Minister, the Minister of Education, the Minister of Finance, and the Minister of Labor. The Minister of Labor's office called to say that he will be out of the country for 2 days. We have not heard from the rest. But let me get the message. I wish that the message get clear straight to them. They will not determine for us who we invite, who our friends will be. They will not determine for us. Our understanding is that they have made a point that they will not talk with unions that they consider to be in the opposition or not aligned to them. I only want to say to you, you are expected to uphold the Constitution. And they are also expected to uphold the Constitution. And when they took the oath of office as a member of parliament, a prime minister, a president, they have all sworn to respect the rights of citizens. You have a right to join a political party of your choice. They have a right to join a political party of their choice. While we respect their rights, don't be afraid when you leave here and they raise anything to say to them that it is your fundamental right to join any political party or to associate with any political party of your choice or any group that you so desire. As long as you don't pick up arms and you're not doing anything illegal. I believe that it is important because I recognize that persons are so afraid in this society to stand for their rights. I believe it's important that I reinforce this position today. It is our right. It is our right. It is their right. They have anything that they do to deny us our rights, we need to challenge them. I made a point yesterday that we need to begin to consider the idea of having a legal team that deal with legal matters for us. We got to shut these people up. The PSU took them to court. That matter is still languishing. I want them to understand. I'm calling now on the judiciary. These matters that trade unions are taking to court are taking years. Justice delay is justice denied. And the time has come for these matters to be dealt with expeditiously. You can't get them somebody because they don't like somebody. They decide that they're not going to deal with an organization. I want to tell you this. I want to clear something. A man called me this morning, and he's talking about the trade union, and he's calling people names. And he said, is this man caused the trade union, the government not to talk with them? And that person caused the government not to. I said to that person, it is not the person who leads the trade union that caused the government not to be treated with the trade union. It is what the trade union represent. It is what the trade union represent. This is what they're afraid of. And you must understand this. This is not a person. It's not a personality. It is about the institution. It is the only institution in this society. The only institution in this society where you can walk to the office and you can tell the leader what you want to tell them. If we put together, recognizing that it's a powerful organization, you check the membership of the membership of the trade union community and check the membership of any one of the political parties. You know, we get no members here. We get more members in the trade union. But I'm saying that to say this to you. You ought not to be afraid. We gave, as I said earlier yesterday, we gave the political party the agenda. After the first, we gave them the agenda and program. After the first mass-based political party was established in 1950. And we declutched from the politics. We have to go back. Because the men and women that we were treating with then, if they had walked into the parliament compound and they look at that statue there, they would have known this is Hubert Nathaniel Critchlow. I will tell you this, that 9/10 of them who were in the National Assembly passed that they know it's Critchlow statue. And they will tell you that the employer gave you 8-hour work day. They will not tell you that the trade union and the workers fought for that 8-hour work. When you leave here, I will expect you to go to tell the workers, tell your members that, and all workers, let them know that these things that they're enjoying today, people gave their lives for those things. 40-hour work week. You know what the law says and apply in this country over the years? After 8 hours per day, you're entitled to premium pay. Okay? You know what you've been told now? That by new employers, those many that come to this country, that you will not get pay, you will not get premium pay after 8 hours. You have to wait for 40 hours before you get that. And for that reason, we cannot allow them to apply and interpret our laws as they choose fit. And when you go to the Ministry of Labor, you are there, you are confronted with a situation where you're told to come back, or even if you make an application, they take months. You have to write about 5 or 6 times. All like the PSU, they have to write must be a year. Plus, them and the GTU, before they apply, before they seek to address the issue. And when they address the issue, they meet, you know, let me tell you something. I have not got weary But I have lived to see, even before I became a trade unionist, I've lived to see how industrial relations matters were handled in this country. I have lived to see. I remember an incident where a designation of a man was changed arbitrarily in the bauxite company. They just redesignate the man, put on some more work on it. And the workers sat down. And when the workers sat down, the next day the industrial relation director came in. And he said, "What's the matter? Let us hear what's the matter." And he said, this man designation has been changed. This is what the man has been trained. This is because. He said, "So what are you asking for?" He said, "We want it to remain because the man has been given more work and the same pay." The industrial relations director looked around and he said, "I see no problem with this. Strike end." He said, "This is what you're asking for. This is what it should be." Now they give you, now they come and they write you, they give you a job description and they write on it and they say any other duty. You know what they're doing now? If you're a clerk, they tell you that you have to go and do the janitorial work. Right? These are things that we have, these cultures that the people are changing, are imposing on us. We have to stand up to these things. We have to stand up to them. Unless we do that, and the standing up has to take place at the workplace. Don't go, if you decide that you're going to get it changed by going to the Labor Department, Ministry of Labor, and so on, you better believe it, that you will live and many of us may die. Like how the GTC workers for their pension, many of them are dying. The court has pronounced, but the government has refused to pay. These are serious issues. But let me, before I close, say this. We have to go to every nook, every cranny. We have to do that. This thing, we have to create alliances between organizations, among groups. We will have to do that. Many of the people are afraid to do what ought to be done. I'm saying to you, new strategy. Same plan. New strategy, same plan. A change has to come. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, brothers and sisters. We shall break while we talk, while we deal with the issue of the arms.
Thank you, Brother General Secretary. And I heard a few new thinking. I call for new thinking. I've heard the General Secretary said we must get a legal team to tackle some of these problems. That's a new thinking. That's a new initiative. We got to work towards it. I heard you analyze some of the workers' plight. I heard the workers' apathy or fear. How do we tackle this fear? How do we correct it? New thinking. I love it. We look at one of the issues we got on the table right now is collective bargaining. How do we correct it? How do we force the employers that be to come to the table? We got the issue of contract work. We need new thinking. We need new initiatives to come up with strategies to to work on these issues that we have. Now, some of you might know this, but we had a retreat we call the Essequibo retreat, where we sit down and analyze all of these issues some time back. About 10 years back with Tusi, the mainstay retreat. And we come up with a working document, I think through the ILO and the South African, what's the name again? The name slipping me. The South African, where we sit down and analyze the workers' plight. And we came up with a working plan. I think it's time we revisit that document, bring it up to the fore, and hold another set of session and go through this thing with a fine-teeth comb, so that we could come up with new strategies, new thinking, so we could, well, we could add to it, but most of the plight is in there. Most of the solution that we come up with, or the suggestion for solution, is in there. So we can share it with the young workers and let they come up with. Remember, some young workers got the new thinking in their head. We got to get them together and get it out. You know. Having said that, a colleague of mine said to me, you know, you chaired yesterday, you chaired this morning, and you didn't introduce yourself. So I'm sorry. The name is Pancham Singh, Vice President of the Ghana Trade Union Congress, or one of the Vice President, and the General Secretary of the General Workers Union. For those the young workers who don't know me, I'm sorry about that. So, with having said that, we'll now break for lunch. And see you back this afternoon. Brother Wutisi would like to say a few words. In the next hour.
Yes, sir. I hear you. Brother Singh would have mentioned this mainstay retreat. I think one of the important things at that retreat was that we as the TUC must visit unions, so that because they're leaders that people may not be comfortable with, they'd like to know a few things, and we need to find out what those problems are in those unions, so that we can assist them in reaching where they need to be. Because